Shall we begin, sir?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. A very good evening to one and all present in the Gibbs Talks Season 1 on the theme Roadmap to Higher Education Post-COVID-19. Once again, I, Kavya Buddhiraja, on behalf of Geeta Ratan International Business School, Rohini, extend a warm welcome to you all in this third episode of Gibbs Talks Season 1. Vakratund Mahakaya, Suryakoti Samaprabha, Nirvignam Kuru Meidev, Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada, which means, O Lord Ganesha, my humble prostrations to you, who is an embodiment of all wishes. Remembering you, I begin my studies, so that your grace and blessings shall bring success always. It is always auspicious to begin every event by glorifying Lord Ganesha. So let us all invoke Lord Ganesha by singing his Vandana together. All India Council for Technical Education, also known as AICTE, was established under the Ministry of HRD by the Union Government of India to fulfill the objective of promotion of quality in technical education, planning and coordinated development of technical education system and regulations and maintenance of norms and standards. Geeta Ratan International Business School started its journey in the year 2004 with the approval of All India Council for Technical Education with its flagship program of MBA. During its 16 years journey, GIBS gradually started various programs, and all these programs are affiliated to Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University, Delhi. The institute is accredited as Category A by NAC in its second cycle and has been assessed as Category A+ by State Fee Regulatory Committee. Also, it has been rated the highest grading A by Joint Inspection Committee of Government of NCT of Delhi and Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University, Delhi. The institute has been rated grade A by Academic Audit Cell of Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University consecutively from last 7 years. GIBS has also been rated number 2 twice by the Times B School Survey. Now, let me take you down to the topic of today's evening. In the last 2 episodes, we have unfurled many unknown facts before the attendees by the academic stalwarts of the country. Yet, many are there still unknown. And so, to exhume those questions wandering around in the minds of the stakeholders, this talk show has brought another academic think tank of the country on today's evening. He is none other than the chairman, All India Council for Technical Education, Professor Dr. Anil Dattatray Sahasrabuddhe. Sir will deliver his speech today on the sub-theme Reshaping Higher Education, the AICTE Guide. The All India Council for Technical Education declared a series of revolutionary measures at the beginning of the year 2020. All these steps were directed towards achieving technical education as per the global education system. However, all of a sudden, this lockdown posed as a huge road breaker before the journey of development. Our education system has come to a standstill condition from the last 3 months. So what is the way out? And now, let me take this wonderful opportunity to welcome and introduce you all to our today's legend, Professor Dr. Anil Dattatray Sahasrabuddhe, Chairman, All India Council for Technical Education, New Delhi. He will elaborate us on the topic Reshaping Higher Education, the AICTE Guide. Professor Sahasrabuddhe's academic credentials have always kept him on the top. He obtained his bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering with a gold medal from Karnataka University, securing first rank in all semesters. He obtained his master's and PhD degrees from the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and received distinction as well. He has been an institution builder with a strong commitment to teaching and nation building. He was associated with 2 new institutes in the remotest region of the country, which are Northeastern Regional Institute of Science and Technology in Arunachal Pradesh and the 6th IIT, which is Indian Institute of Technology, Guwahati. Professor Dr. D. Sahasrabuddhe is an eminent academician, an astute leader, a far-sighted visionary, and a renowned luminary of great eminence. He is an entrepreneur and a great humanitarian who instituted changes to make the education sector more accessible by continued support and training. Professor Sahasrabuddhe, in his career, has held important academic, research, and administrative positions and can be rightly considered to be the change catalyst, who not only has the knowledge and engaging enthusiasm, but also has distinguished himself in multiple areas of academia, including teaching, research, and service. He is also an innovator for multiple methods of classroom teaching and molding teaching strategies to fit the needs. This excellence comes not only from his powerful ethic of care and responsibility to society, but also his innovative creation of learning environments. For his zeal and unwavering commitment, he has been bestowed with the Praj Entrepreneur Award and the Jeevan Puraskar Award of MIT World Peace University, and is the chairman of the Basic Scientific Research Committee of UGC. During his tenure at AICTE so far, he has already introduced several reforms to make AICTE a vibrant organization. The world's largest hackathon, the Adjunct Faculty Scheme, Mentorship Scheme for helping technical institutes, National Doctoral Fellowship Scheme, and other few initiatives have attracted the attention of the Honorable President of India. MHRD had given the responsibility of developing India's indigenous MOOCs platform, which is Swayam, to AICTE, which was successfully handled under Professor Sahasrabuddhe's leadership. He is an approachable academic entrepreneur who relates well to the stakeholders with compassion and inclusiveness, helping them to engage fully in their learning. Sir, it is indeed our privilege to have you here with us on the third episode of Gibbs Talks season 1. We warmly welcome you, sir. Thank you so much for graciously accepting our invitation. Sir, may you please now enlighten all of us with your words of wisdom. You may kindly carry the session forth. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Kavya. And I have been interacting with Anirudh. Great work being done by Gibbs. Gita Ratan. नाम में ही गीता यानी भगवत गीता है और रतन यानी डायमंड ज्वेल, तो दोनों का सम्मिलन जिसमें होता है, ऐसे गीता रतन इंस्टीट्यूट विच इज इंटरनेशनल बिजनेस स्कूल is certainly doing a wonderful job in the 16 years. And therefore, it is my pleasure to interact with not only your students and faculty, but all those who are attending this particular webinar. आपने जो हमको सब्जेक्ट दिया गया है, रीशेपिंग द हायर एजुकेशन, मेरे ख्याल से फ्रॉम अबाउट लास्ट 3 years, you said that in 2020 we started doing something, but it has a historical beginning. For about 5 years, we have been working on some of the reforms agenda, and the focus was because of what is known as Cow Committee report. I don't know how many of you are aware. The MHRD had instituted a committee called Cow Committee, which had a couple of professors from IITs and University Vice Chancellor, and this report contained roadmap for the technical education for the future of the country, and using various facets of what transformation was necessary and was told, we started working on that. And by 2017, we had frozen on some of the very important initiatives for shaping the future of technical education. This particular topic today is reshaping higher education. Technical education is one of the components of that. So both management and engineering, which are very important, predominant activities under technical education, both come under this umbrella. Of course, remaining higher education institutions include those from the universities having arts, commerce, science, medicine, law, all those institutions, and there are some common threads between technical education and the remaining part of the education, which is higher education. So if you reflect back what all we have done, and fundamental question which was being raised by the industry, by the society, by the government, all along was on employability of the graduates. India, with very low gross enrollment ratio at the time of independence, as low as 0.7%, and we had a vision of reaching 30% by 2020. We have already come to 28%, so our vision has been more or less being achieved. But all the time, emphasis was on access and equity, that any child who wants to come into the higher education should have enough opportunities. And it should be nearer home. And that is why colleges were opened in all districts of the country, in all remote regions of the country, and therefore access and equity parameters were to a great extent achieved. But when it comes to quality, there were a lot of question marks raised by the industry, by the society, that the graduates are not good enough for being employed. And that is where Cow Committee report had given some of the leading thoughts actually, and we took it up from ourselves. One reason which universities are not doing was revision of the curriculum at regular intervals. If we are teaching 19th century or 20th century material to our children in the schools and colleges and higher education institutions in the 21st century, I think there is a big mismatch. And naturally, industry will not accept such graduates. and therefore first and foremost principle was to make them on board with the new technologies into the curriculum. And that was the first exercise which we started off doing. Second one was having got those things into the curriculum. Our teachers who themselves graduated long back need to be trained in all these upcoming niche, new emerging areas. And that's why we had an exhaustive faculty development program launched under the banner of Atal Academies. This Atal stands for AICT's Training and Learning Academies. We started off with 4, then subsequently added 11 more. So we have about 15 Atal Academies in existence today, and all of them are giving the faculty development programs in very important areas like artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, machine learning, 3D printing, robotics, blockchain, cloud computing, cyber security, augmented reality, virtual reality, data analytics. So you name any upcoming area which is important for both management education as well as engineering education. In fact, gradually it is going to become important even for arts, commerce, science, medicine, all variety of education. These topics are going to become very important. So we started off with training of faculty in these niche areas through some of the best teachers available in the country from say IITs and NITs on one side, and the industry people who have been working on those problems and finding solutions. They were also involved in this exercise. We had another initiative of faculty training program for making them ready for actually teaching process itself. So there is no teaching certification program that exists anywhere in the world, but we, with the committee's recommendation, started off what is known as faculty certification program consisting of 8 modules with subsequently 1 month of internship in an industry, followed by that practicing all the content that one has learnt in those 8 modules and the internship into the real classroom, and someone, senior faculty member, observing, guiding, mentoring, and then once one is successfully implementing all that what he has learnt in these 8 modules, which start from passion for teaching, passion for technology, and then most important thing, how do you design curriculum, how do you set question papers, how do you interact with students, how do you empower our students, how do you use ICT tools, how you can become innovative, how you give innovative questions and projects for students. All of this is part of this 8 modules. And I think this is first time that is being done anywhere in the world, and we started off with this exercise way back, as I said, in 2017. This is as far as faculty are concerned. But moving ahead, as far as students are concerned, when they join an institute coming from different backgrounds, we have a student induction program of 3 weeks duration, and which has a variety of content ranging from communication skills, collaboration, teamwork, knowing about the institute, and being associated with the institute fully, and therefore taking them around the institute, taking them to nearby industry, taking them to geographical and historically important places near the educational institute, and that way make them as owners of the institute. Ownership with the institute is very, very vital. And all of this is being done by faculty members through this 3 weeks induction program, and therefore faculty training in even universal human values and student induction program is also done in a big way. We have examination reforms introduced. We are aware that our question papers are all based on normally rote learning. You memorize things, and in the examination hall, whatever questions come, you have known the answer, you omit it and get excellent marks. But when you ask them, where do you apply, why do you apply, how is it happening, what, how, and why of that topic is hardly known to any student. There are, of course, notable exceptions. So, therefore, how we really want to take our students in terms of their learning process through what is known as involving them in the entire process of learning. We have had another area which is called student internships, and these internships are of 6 months duration in an industry, whether large scale industry or a small scale industry, medium or small scale, or it may be micro industry, it can be a startup, it can be going to a village under Unnat Bharat Abhiyan and learning the challenges that exist and how do you solve those problems. I think therefore problem solving ability being obtained through variety of experiential learning is what was embedded in this internship program. So we had for students, one is when they enter the system, there is an induction program. And during the process, they have an internship, which is a strong connect with the industry and knowing the industry challenges, and they can become useful to society. With all this, we have this universal human values as a course through which we will create individuals who are going to be better citizens in the future. And that's why values, ethics, morals, integrity, honesty, how do you embed them into the students was another exercise which we started doing. And if the students are supposed to be the great learners, the outcome of the graduation should be in such a manner that the projection of whatever institute wants to achieve has to be achieved. And for that, testing is important, and that is where exam reforms are connected. That instead of only mere rote learning, how you create a question paper where you have a question which tests your understanding, application, synthesis, data analytics, and how you can be innovative. And for this examination reforms also, we have been conducting workshops for faculty members. Then comes the real innovation. And innovation is again one way linked with our question papers. And on the other side, how we give challenging problems to students and make them think out of the box and prepare solutions. And such solutions, when students attempt, some of them may succeed, some of them will fail. Failure is the first step of success. So don't insult a student if he has failed in particular problem solving, because he has in fact learned in the process of failing. And that's why failure is said to be the first step of success. We all know about Thomas Alva Edison. Hundreds and thousands times he failed before an electric bulb was successfully possible to be lit. And then we have electricity at homes where we have all type of bulbs and tube lights and variety of lighting equipment which is there today is thanks to Edison. And this is all possible provided we provide that opportunity. And AICT in the last 3 years already has under its belt 3 Smart India hackathons, problem statements from government, from the industry. We gave them as a challenge to our students and they gave solutions, ideas. We shortlisted in 48, 50 centers. They really solved those problems by remaining awake for 36 hours. And these solutions were further fine-tuned by those students as a part of the project. And then government or the industry have implemented them. And that shows the success of the students, while the industry sometimes cribs about students are not employable. The very same students, given them some guidance, some mentorship, some opportunity, they come of age and create solutions which even industry people are not imagining or not thought of. And that is the strength of our young generation. How we empower them is the basis, and that's why whether it is innovation cells in every institution, whether it is entrepreneurship cell, whether it is creating an incubator and a startup activity in the institution, whereby we create not only employable engineers and managers, but also those who can start startups and in the process create jobs for the future generation. I think that is what we have already been doing. Now, when you talk about reshaping the higher education, what difference will it be possible? I will reflect upon one of the other activities which was mentioned while reading the biodata, that is creation of a Swayam portal, which is an indigenous MOOCs portal. MOOCs stands for Massive Online Open Courses. Swayam stands for Study Webs for Learning by Young and Aspiring Minds. And such a platform such as Swayam with 2,500 courses, with as many as 114 countries watching them, 1.2 crore students onto this platform. It's an amazing thing which has happened in the last 3 years. And Swayam 2.0 is being now prepared by IIT Madras, where it is in the form of plug and play that various other MOOCs platform creators can also come onto this platform, and we can branch out and take best possible education from the best possible faculty anytime, anywhere, by any device is all made possible. I think this is the journey. So why I am reflecting to this Swayam, UGC and AICT has allowed 20% of the credits to be earned through MOOCs platform. That means even if you do not have a faculty in a very important area where student is interested, in which student is interested, I think you need not worry. You need not appoint a teacher for just 2 or 5 students. You can ask those students to look at Swayam platform, the best possible course in the domain in which he is interested or she is interested, she can take, and then transfer these credits after graduation, during their graduation program, into the mark sheet or the transcript. I think this empowerment is already made. And then many colleges had their own learning management systems like Moodle, or they had their own some kind of a platform through which faculty sometimes were taking online classes of their own students. This COVID-19 has suddenly created a big vacuum in terms of stopping of the classes. The learning, which is supposed to be lifelong, which is supposed to be also self-learning, suddenly came to a grinding halt. And that is where this online education or YouTube-based education or MOOCs-based education has got prominence. And now we are thinking about increasing this 20% credits to be transferred through Swayam to 40% and involving other MOOCs platforms as well. So this is one side. Other side, the questions which are raised quite often are that this kind of platforms and internet, you can learn only if you have the bandwidth and internet connectivity at your homes, at your respective places. And when the lockdown happened, students had to go to their villages, towns, away from the educational institution. And although some institutions carried on lecturing and the classes through online mode, students were not in a position to attend to them, and therefore there was a lot of heartburn and sorry state of affair that was reflected in the media as well as in the emails that the students were writing. Some of the institutions who conducted online examination, students were not happy because they did not have enough bandwidth. So on one side, after the lockdown is over, one of the important responsibilities on the government, which has to provide basic facilities, is in terms of creating infrastructure, which is fiber optic connectivity to every village. Like we had every village should have a road, every village should have an electricity, every village should have internet capability. Once we have in the village, further down the line, going to every hamlet, every house, every citizen will get access to internet. And sometimes if it is not through internet, at least through the broadband on the mobile and smartphone is possible. So this is the second exercise which government has to do if we have to reshape the higher education, because some of the courses which we were not able to conduct now, we are going to conduct right now in the online mode, and this facilitation may continue and should continue and shall continue. But now what is the proportion of the education that should be online? What proportion should be in the face-to-face mode? And I call it as a blended mode in a different sense. Earlier, before COVID-19, our definition of blended learning was students are asked to watch a video of a particular YouTube or from a Swayam platform, come prepared to the class, and in the class, teacher will ask whether they have understood, will explain some of the philosophy behind that course, some of the basic knowledge about that, create knowledge about fundamentals, then ask students to solve some of the challenging problems in the teams, and a lot of interaction happens in the classroom. So while some part of the study happens at home and in the hostel rooms, remaining part of application-oriented knowledge or wisdom is created in the classroom. I think that was the philosophy which we thought of as what is known as blended learning or flipped classroom. But today I am talking about of a different blend. Like we have fruit juice where you have apple, you have orange, You have pineapple, you have banana, you have mango, and you can create a mixed fruit juice. And depending on the taste that you wish, you want more on the sweetish side or a sour side, you will add some content more than the other content. It need not be equal proportions. And exactly the same way, tomorrow's higher education, which we need to shape or reshape, has to be on the basis of which education can be more on the online mode and which requires more physical face to face mode. Maybe some of the topics like engineering, architecture, medicine will require more of the physical face to face mode of teaching learning, while management education can be more on the face to face, maybe less, and more on the online mode. I think this proportion has to be decided by individual programs depending on the nature of the program, nature of the course, nature of the place, geographical location where you are located with internet capability or less capability. I think all of these are going to be reshaping the higher education in the future. But ultimately, what is the goal of learning after all, or the education after all? To empower our citizenry, that is, every student who comes in has to go out of the education institution as a successful candidate who can face the life outside. Because our educational institution, he has cozy life. But once you go out in the competition, you have to be cutthroat into the competition, and therefore, in order to survive, you require a variety of skills, whether it is communication skills, listening skills, capability of working in teams, leadership, also hard skills and soft skills. And how do you do all of this while one is in the educational institution? This also needs to be divided. So, skill part and general education part. And this will make an individual empowered and confident. And when we talk about empowerment and confidence, please understand that every human being comes with certain important inbuilt capabilities through the DNA. Every human being is different. All five figures are not same, they are different. All human beings are not same. Some are fair, some are black, some are brown, some have big eyes, some have small eyes, some have long nose. I think each individual carries a DNA which creates a human being, and every human being has a different learning ability. Some learn through lectures, some learn through doing practical things by hands on, some look at experiential learning capability of others and learn, some learn by PowerPoint presentation, some can learn by the internet. I think, therefore, depending on what is his nature, each one of them should be allowed to practice and also go into internship and look at the world around outside the college and become confident citizens who will not only help their families, themselves, but also the society around, the state where they live, the nation where they live, and ultimately including the nature and the environment and the entire globe. So there is a big responsibility on the education sector, and this learning has to be also lifelong. And only then we can be called as successful individuals. And therefore, many times I say that artificial distribution of the education as school education or preschool education, nursery, KG, or education at family level, high school, college, university, and all of that is segregated into components, which is also wrong. It is actually a continuum in mechanical engineering, in many courses, whether it is engineering mechanics or in fluid mechanics, and we talk about what is known as continuum. Continuum is, it is, everything is continuous. The space around us is continuous. There is everywhere oxygen, and this continuum we artificially divide and say that this is primary education, this is higher education, and so on. So I think we must understand continuity where values are created right from family till the higher education. This is one part. Secondly, all new products and processes that we see in the nature as well as in our day-to-day life, whether it is TV, whether it is refrigerator, whether it is a building, whether it is our college, our university, the industry, all of that is cross-disciplinary and interdisciplinary. nothing is a product which can be called as purely civil engineering, purely aerospace, purely electrical engineering. And therefore, there is a lot of cross-disciplinary activity which is required. Therefore, our projects which we give to our students in the colleges and universities must involve students from all domains, and also the problem should be such that input from all these domains is necessary. In fact, in the industry outside, it is not only engineering and management, but also philosophy, psychology, sociology. This is also very, very important when you develop a new product, because product may be very good from technical point of view. Managers may be very good in marketing and therefore they may be marketing, but the takers will not be there because of social stigma, because of their attitude, and therefore various other aspects are also very important. Therefore, in our curricula, not only technical domain subjects, but we must have humanities and social sciences as part of the integrated curriculum for us. We should also be proud of our heritage. So, whether it is our Indian knowledge systems in terms of whether it is Ayurveda, mathematics, or science, or chemistry, or chemical engineering, which we should be proud of, which will also be part of the curriculum. We should be concerned about environment. Any development that we do must have sensitivity towards our environment, and therefore, while content is important, what is the outcome that we want to achieve is important. That's why AICTE has also made accreditation mandatory for all institutions in the next 3 years. If they don't get 50% of the programs accredited, they will have to close their college. And therefore, it's a warning signal that we must start processing ourselves towards accreditation. But we will help you. We have a scheme called Margadarshak and Margadarshan, under which experienced faculty, senior faculty from different IITs, NITs, senior professors from different institutions who are willing to help other institutions are onboarded. Some of the best institutions are also asked to help other institutions. And I think in this manner, we have been in a position to create a variety of activities, each one of them leading to improvement in the quality of technical education. And we have recently launched what is known as National Educational Alliance for Technologies, artificial intelligence, AI based personalized learning tools, which are offered by various companies, are onboarded by due diligence. And every 4 students, when they buy that product, 1 student gets this free of cost. I think this is another area where we are trying to develop employability of our graduates, and not just employability, higher level of employability. I think this is what we have been continuously doing and which needs to be continued. And this is nothing but reshaping the higher education. And I'm sure new national education policy is also on the cards, where a lot of emphasis on vocational education, skill education, general education, research and innovation on these aspects is laid. And once the draft policy is converted into a formal policy, we will all work together, whether it is industry, whether it is educational institutions, private or government, the government itself, the regulator, the society. If we work together, any such crisis such as COVID-19, which will come anytime in the future, we will face such crisis in a much better prepared way than what we faced today. But we have faced today also, and we are very happy that it is still under control compared to some of the developing and developed nations. With these few words, I conclude. And if there are any questions from the audience, I would like to answer them.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. It was indeed a knowledge-filled session, and the measures you've mentioned concerning the artificial intelligence was truly vivacious. We really appreciate it. And sir, we definitely feel enlightened with the ray that you have shown to us through this guide. We do sense courage that this darkness will definitely be dispelled very soon, and we will get the spark of technical knowledge once again. Thank you so much, sir. And now, to begin with the question and answer session, I would like to inform to our audience that for this session, we had received more than 3,500 questions as submitted by different stakeholders at the time of their registration, which is definitely a very high number. And I also feel that all the attendees would like to get all their queries answered from sir. However, due to paucity of time, we're only placing the best questions in front of sir so as to get the maximum coverage area. So with your kind permission, sir, shall we begin with the question and answer session?
Yeah, sure, sure.
Much obliged, sir. So starting with the first question, which has been put forth by Mr. Shashi Tarun, faculty at Lovely Professional University, Punjab. The question he seeks to ask is, can we convert every technical institution as a special center for production, technology, service business model?
I think, Sashiji, this is a wonderful idea. In fact, if you look at medical education, every medical college is required to be associated with a hospital where students, after their 4.5 years of formal education, go to the hospital and serve there for 1 year under a senior doctor, and only then they are allowed to register and start practicing, and which unfortunately is not there in technical education right from inception. See, for medical education, it has been there even pre-independence era. Every medical college has an associated hospital, either your own hospital or at least some government hospital with which you are attached. If had technical education when it took off, as and when it took off, had this model of having a production center and also a technology development center and a service center along with a college, I think we would have been in a position to be a better prepared nation in terms of technology as well. Unfortunately, it did not start off. We did not even have internship. At least AICT in the last 3 years has said mandatory internship, and to help those institutions which are in rural areas who cannot have industry institute collaboration so easily, we have created a portal through which internships are provided to students. Now, if someone who has enough area, land into their college premises, and if they have enough built area, if they develop a production center. In fact, every college, especially engineering college, does have a workshop. They have laboratories. They have a computer center. Why can't you use this facility itself for what Sashi Tarunji is asking? You use that for that purpose, because you are not using 24/7 all these facilities. Yeah, you have a practical class for about 3 hours for one batch, another batch 3 hours. So you may be using out of 30, 40 hours per week, maybe some 12 to 15 hours of that particular facility. Remaining 15 hours, it is idling. In the whole evening and night, it is idling. Who has stopped from using it as a production center or a technology center or a service center? I think if someone does that, some poor children who cannot afford to pay the fees probably can get some kind of a employment while studying. It is like earn while learn, and some production if they do, and if that is marketed, and that money which is earned is not taken by the college for profit making but handed over to that student to pay the fees, I think it is a win-win situation.
Thank you, sir. Moving forth with the next question, which has been put forth by Mr. Harish Premi, faculty, Punjab Technical University, Punjab. The question is, the fast pace of privatization of higher education is resulting in the dilution of sanctity of education system. So what steps can be taken in order to restore it?
This is a heavily loaded question, Harish ji. Very difficult to speak out on the part of a regulator, come facilitator, come a government body. If I was outside the domain, I would have been more scathing in my speeches. But in fact, the concern that is raised is absolutely real. We have a population of 1.3 billion population. Our gross enrollment ratio, which I said, is around 28%. 1/4 of that is catered to by the technical education. That means out of the entire population who come into the higher education sector, 28% come, remaining 72% are deprived of higher education beyond 11th and 12th. I think that is the fact. How we become more than 40%, 50% is the goal which has been set by the new national education policy. I think it's a challenge. Now, previously when I was speaking, I talked about blended model of online education. Probably many domains where you don't require to formally come to the class. Someone can be in the job but still continue the education. This is possible, and in such a case, the amount of fee that one has to pay can be much less, and therefore, even though there is privatization, I think we can keep the fee under check. There are fee regulatory committees in every state. They check for not allowing the institutions to make profit, because we in our country very categorically assume that education is meant for philanthropy. It is not meant for business. It is not meant for making profit. That's why whether it is trust or society or Section 8 company, whichever is allowed to form an educational institute, first and foremost thing is not for profit. The words not for profit are there. Whereas some of the advanced countries, they are for profit. Secondly, some countries, even highly democratic and highly rich countries, entire education is borne by the government. For example, I will tell you, in Europe, Germany has entire education right from school to the PhD education is free. They don't charge any tuition fee. Entire thing is taken care of by the government, whether it is a private or a government university, and that requires a lot of money. And India, with its own resources being limited, probably that is not possible. That's why from 1980s it was opened up for private entities to be in operation in education sector, and today they cover 75%. Government institutions are only 25%. Private institutions are 75%. And in such a scenario, the only model which can work is how we empower more and more children to be doing earn while learn on one side, how many students can be provided scholarship by the government, thereby education is made accessible to the entire sections of the society. I think that's where we stand. And therefore, I am concerned about dilution of the sanctity of the system, what he has raised. But the answer is we have a multifaceted activity which we have to do. There is a responsibility even on two kind of people. One is industry. They have a huge money as CSR fund, because their 2% of the profit is to be spent on CSR. Why can't they engage in large number of scholarship for those who cannot afford to pay the fees? Second, those who can afford the fees, why can't they pay higher fee and don't demand education at a lower cost? If my son and daughter can afford to pay higher fee, I must be prepared for that. Like gas subsidy was given up by people, I think subsidy in education also should be given up by the people who have wherewithal. Maybe 20-25% of the population can pay that. Remaining 50% people have difficulty. And the lowest 25% have greater difficulty. How we empower them is the question which we should ask ourselves and find multiple solutions.
Thank you so much, sir. It was indeed knowledgeable. The next question has been put forth by Dr. Harshvardhan Kothari, faculty at Delhi Institute of Advanced Studies, Delhi. The question is, what reorientation is needed for the teachers to prepare for changes post-COVID-19?
Teachers have started changing on their own during the COVID time itself. So post-COVID is much easier, because they were not used to these kind of things prior to COVID action, and therefore they were going as business as usual. And suddenly when classes stopped, they were forced to start classes in an online mode. So whatever change, transformation, attitude change is required partly has happened. And AICTE on its part, as I said, different varieties of faculty development programs. They are concentrated on all variety. Change in attitude. Our program of student induction program, where faculty are involved, are trained in that. Then examination reforms, we train in that. Research methodology workshop, we training faculty. We have these Atal academies, we are training. So I think teachers are getting prepared. Probably more number of now workshops on how to handle online education is another set of workshops that we need to engage. And if we do that and prepare our teachers, and teachers must be willing to learn. See, सबसे important ये है. Teachers बोलेंगे कि मैं नहीं सीखूंगा, मैंने already PhD कर लिया है. So I think we will not be in a position to do anything. That is, regulator or facilitator can take the horse to a water, but we cannot force it to drink water. It is the same with students and faculty. We have been enabling the entire technical education system, whether students or faculty. Please make use of all this opportunity that we are given, and with no cost. See, we are not asking for any money for this. We are providing on our own. Please make use of that, and I'm sure if that attitude is developed, post COVID-19 era is going to be a bright era for India.
Indeed true, sir. Indeed true. And obviously, as it is said, change is the only constant thing that we can ever have. So the next question is by Dr. Dilip Nandkyolyar of faculty from Commonwealth University. The question is Gurukul pedagogy versus systems-driven pedagogy. Your kind view, sir.
I think there is nothing like versus. In my opinion, Gurukul pedagogy and systems driven pedagogy are one and the same. It is only the nature of system, how we look at it, how we view it may be different. Even today, in the modern era, some of the terminologies which I also used and many Western world educational institutions and educationists use are experiential learning, project based learning. We say we have what is known as internships. We have theory and practice should go hand in hand. Skill should be imparted. I think all of this vocabulary and the language which is there in the systems driven pedagogy today is nothing but the Gurukul pedagogy. You go to the pedagogy of Gurukul, a student used to leave his home, stay in the Guru's house, and not only theory part of it was taught, and of course, unfortunately or fortunately, whatever, there were no buildings. They were all below the tree getting this education in an open atmosphere, fresh air, with nice surroundings, the nature, and those theory things, whatever were taught, were asked to be experimented. And even tasks as menial as getting firewood from the forest to fetching of water from the river or the well nearby is required to teach something or other. How difficult it is to cut a tree and get the wood for firewood. How difficult it is to carry water, and women in India in villages carry for 10 kilometers. Every boy also should go and fetch that water, not just the mothers. And that is where we start learning. And therefore, whether in the curriculum it is gardening, agriculture, doing carpentry, doing some kind of workshop activities, not necessarily in only engineering, in management, in arts, commerce, science, I think that is important. And that is Gurukul pedagogy, and which is nothing but systems driven pedagogy. There is nothing versus. It's only your spectacles or the glasses that you wear, you look it differently in different colors.
Thank you, sir. You did correct. You just showed the very correct picture. So the next question is a highly demanded one. So it has been raised by various faculty members of different universities and higher educational institutions. So the question is, in the post-COVID period, what will be the best process so as to evaluate the students' performance?
I think I have already talked about examination reforms. I may have to again reiterate some of that. What we call it as Bloom's taxonomy, where learning is evaluated not based on memory. That means rote learning, which can be at most 25 to 30%. Rest of that is understanding of the subject, application, synthesis, analytical and critical ability, innovation, and creativity. I think question papers are required to be based on all these facets. And if we are able to do that, which was required only also Esther era, we unfortunately did not do it. And now, post-COVID era at least, since we were forced to undertake some of these things, why can't we start making use of them more elaborately and gradually move into the domain which I talked about? The holistic exercise is necessary. And I talked about only those 7-8 different varieties of evaluation as far as curriculum is concerned. What we used to consider as extracurricular, gradually we have started calling it as co-curricular. How co-curricular also becomes curricular is important. For example, sports. Every individual must get into some kind of a sport. We must evaluate, add some marks of that into the university transcript. in terms of yoga, in terms of his skills, whether they are physical skills or various types of soft skills or life skills, values, ethics. I think we must be graded for all of that. If we do that, we get a 360-degree evaluation of a personality, and any industry which wants to recruit or any person who wants to employ them will understand a person much better, and that is the student's overall performance evaluation.
Thank you, sir. Moving forward to the next question by Ms. Manisha Patwari, faculty at Geeta Ratan International Business School. The question is, how should institutions function in the post-COVID crisis period?
तो मैंने बार बार बताया कि there are three types of things which are possible. One of them is entire online. This is one model. Or entirely we have face-to-face mode of education. And between the two, which I said often as blended, we can have blend of a different variety that we have to open up. We must come together. As human beings, being social animals, we enjoy coming together, whether it is birthday parties, marriage parties, social functions, religious functions, Independence Day, Republic Day, or Onam, or Lori, whatever it is, we want to come together and enjoy. And if you stop all of that, we will not remain as human beings, and probably there will be huge psychological problems which will emerge. And therefore, coming together is important. But while coming together is important, if we ignore the pandemic and the COVID crisis, and beyond COVID, I don't know how long it is going to sustain, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. So the norm of social distancing, wearing masks, using sanitizers, and not coming in large numbers together is going to be there. Therefore, the different models can emerge. One-third students will come every day by rotation, different one-third students. Thereby, social distancing is maintained, examinations can be conducted for all students, and we can still have sports, music, dance, drama, painting, all of that. I think that is the way forward for the educational institutions.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is by Ms. Monica Saini, faculty. The question is, do you feel that quality of our technical education is lower than that of other nations or other countries?
No, I can't believe this kind of a change. Certainly, it is not the best. I think we should be, true to ourselves, and we are not bad. If you observe, some of the best companies of the world, take it Apple, Microsoft, Google, and also NASA and many other such organizations, it is all either headed by Indian students, or there are a huge number of them being employed there. Why did it happen? All the education was from here. So it is not as bad as we often project ourselves, but we are not certainly the best of the lot. So we need to certainly improve. Our improvement is necessary, but we are not low. And this is also proved from what is known as Stanford study, which MHRD and AICT through TechWhip we had conducted, that three countries, China, Russia, and India, were compared based on the US, that is Stanford being in US. The basis was US, and along with that, Russia, China, and India were studied. And the preliminary investigation and report shows that although while entering the technical education system, our students are not as well prepared as all other three countries, but by the time they graduate, they come up very close to these countries. That itself shows that our quality is not bad.
Thank you, sir. So the next question again has been asked by various faculty members of different higher educational institutions and different universities. The question is, will digital mode of education facilitate holistic development of students?
I think this is a challenge. It is much difficult in terms of digital mode of education. That's why I all the time has been saying that we must have face-to-face mode, coming together, discussions, playing, dance, drama. This interaction is very, very lively, and which actually trains the mind. And that's why entirely digital mode of education will not facilitate holistic development.
Thank you, sir. So the next question has been asked by Dr. Praveen Dubey, faculty at DIT University. The question is, with least or with no internet connectivity, or with electricity problems, or with higher cost of hardware at remote locations, then how can e-learning be possible?
इसमें there are a variety of possibilities. First and foremost, along with Swayam, there are 32 direct-to-home channels called as Swayam Prabha channels. And all the content that is delivered through Swayam is also available in the medium of television. That means direct-to-home. What you need is an antenna costing 2,000 rupees, one-time investment. Of course, you require electricity. Without electricity, TV will not work. But if you have that, you can have all the education that I'm talking about at your home. And if a person or a particular family does not have, I think what is most important is sharing. And we found that in COVID-19 time that people helped each other. No one starved to death. There were hundreds and thousands of people in every village, town, cities who lost their jobs, but either government fed them or the people fed them. And similarly, why can't we feed internet to someone who is deprived in our locality? I think I'm posing a simple question. Why can't I give my mobile device, which I have used earlier and is lying idle in my home, a smartphone? Most of the people from middle class, upper middle class families, every 6 months we buy a new mobile phone. Yes or no? I think the answer is loud yes. And there are 5 to 6 such sets available in every home. Why can't we give them as it is if they are working? If they are not, spend some 4 5,000 rupees, fix the problem, and hand over as donation to the library, which in turn goes to those students. I think smart devices. Then government can give data which is free for some of the poorer children, and some of the companies under CSR can give free data for some of the students. I think there are possibilities. And then these IT companies, NASCOM, told us that every year more than 500,000 computers are changed. New computers are bought by them. Why can't they give to every village one computer, and in a common place, whether it is a temple or whether it is a marriage hall, whether it is a common some function hall, where we keep it and bring students, and they will learn both two-way communication through internet being made available there. So I think there are problems, but there are solutions as well.
Thank you, sir. So moving forward to our next question, which has been put forth by Dr. Shanmuga Sundaram Vishwanatham, faculty VTU. The question is, will AICTE publish any new updated handbook after COVID-19?
No, we publish our handbook annually once, and that is during the time of approval process. So the handbook for 2021 is already published, and 21-22 will certainly come before December. So that means we are already now entering into July. So July to December is not even 4 5 months. Post COVID starting will be somewhere around August September. So I will say that yes, but actually it is for 21-22.
Thank you, sir. So our next question is from Mr. Deepak Batra, research scholar, Command University. The question is, what is the future of empirical research in the post-COVID world?
I think there is a scope for empirical research as well as all variety of research, either in the pre-COVID, COVID, and post-COVID era. There is a drug discovery hackathon which is going to be launched in just next 2 days by the Prime Minister's office and the Department of Science and Technology, CSIR, and AICT. And in this, lot of research on the COVID-19 itself is going to be collected, that data. And lot of empirical data is going to be used for research purposes for discovering new drugs, including COVID-19 drugs. So there is always a value for this, but we cannot depend only on empirical research. But sometimes some of the research has to be actually then implemented into practice. Those drugs which are developed and discovered are to be first injected into some of the animals like rat or rabbit or monkey, and then it comes to human testing. So I think I gave an example of biological field or a drug field, which is important today. But same thing is applied for even engineering research. There can be empirical research. It will not stop. But we should not depend only on empirical research, but move ahead in the value chain.
Thank you so much, sir. Moving forward, the question is from Mr. Subodh Pandey, Edupreneur, KPMG. The question is, why are we so dependent on other countries for technology?
I think there was already a gap in terms of technology. If you look at history, we were one up long ago, till about 12th, 13th century, and we started slipping. And by the time we got independence, we were very, very down in terms of new technologies and science and research. And gradually we are picking up. We have still not reached the same level as some of the developed countries, and therefore we have been dependent on that. But the very call given by the Honorary Prime Minister that Atmanirbhar Bharat, we started with Make in India, Digital India, Smart India, and now when we say Atmanirbhar Bharat, the emphasis is going to be of developing technology in-house. At least all those technologies which we are capable of. In fact, if you look at some of the technologies, they are prepared here, they are done by foreign companies at the cost of our talent, and then they sell it back to us. So if you really want to develop, I think we have shown the way, whether it is in ISRO's satellite launch vehicles, liquid propulsion engines, and which country in the world has launched 103 satellites in one go? No other country other than India. So I think that is one. In terms of nuclear science also, we have a variety of new things which we have done. In terms of DRDO, we have done. I think we have the capability, we have to have the will and the confidence, and if you do that, we can be successful. So there is no necessity of dependent on foreign technology, but just because we want to be Swadeshi and we want to develop, if something takes time, there is nothing wrong in taking some of the technologies and using them.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is again a highly demanded one, which has been raised by various faculty members of different universities. The question they seek to ask is, how employability enhancing modules can be integrated with the work or study from home concept in the backdrop of post-COVID pandemic?
I think employability requires a lot of hands-on experience, hands-on solving of the problems, which I already narrated, and therefore internship, which is made mandatory, is important. And as long as this COVID pandemic continues, and therefore social distancing is required to be maintained, and therefore companies will not allow us to get into the company premises, even though they start themselves. I think we may have to depend on online internships for some time, but final we must be able to go to the industry and watch what is happening there and improve the processes over there. And that is what improves the employment.
Thank you, sir. Moving forward, the next question has been put forth by Dr. V.R. Nedunchezian from Kumar Guru College of Technology. The question he seeks to raise is, the present batch is highly worried about their coming future. So please provide some guidance, sir.
I think my first advice to all these worried students is don't worry. It's very easy to say, but difficult to practice. I agree, even if I was in their situation today, I would be in confusion. And same is happening with our young students. Whether exam will be held or not, whether they will get job or not, whether internship is available or not, what will happen to the next session. So all these doubts are in the minds of students. But please understand that this pandemic, which has come now, had come 100 years ago, and large number of deaths were there even at that point in time when the population was much less. And so, compared to that, in terms of advancement, in terms of medical science, we have been far better, better care is possible, and therefore, this phase will also pass someday. It may take a couple of months more. So, in life, which is almost 80, 90, 100 years for the human being, 1 year loss is not a loss. Many people lose it because of a variety of reasons. I should tell you that I have lost 1 year. Not because I failed in the examination, but because our university results came so late during that time that for my post-graduation I had to wait for full 6 months. And our education in engineering was 5 years, unlike 4 years now. So I have lost 1.5 years. But in life I could make it up. So I think don't worry, be confident, keep studying, be a lifelong learner, and I'm sure you will overcome all that comes your way and you will be a successful individual.
Thank you so much for motivating us, sir. Moving forward to the next question, which has been raised by Mr. Sanjay Devkishan Taneja, faculty, Amity University, Lucknow. The question he seeks to raise is, how much impact will MOOCs have on regular teaching patterns?
Yeah, I think there is not much of an impact. See, just because MOOCs is there and 20% or tomorrow 40% is allowed, I'm asking a counter question. Why can't professors in ordinary affiliated colleges or small private or government colleges also create MOOCs courses? No one has stopped. I think that is the strength which we have to use. So you should not be afraid. And secondly, although there are MOOCs courses which students can take on the MOOCs platform, whatever they don't understand or whatever challenging problems are there in your vicinity, in your neighborhood, why can't faculty think aloud, go out of the box, do innovation, and make the class more interesting in the form of blended learning mode? I think, therefore, the impact is those who do not want to learn from what is happening across the globe, and if you are not ready to learn, you are going to be affected. But otherwise, those who are willing to change, those who are willing to have that attitude of change, I think they will be as successful as any one of the best faculty in the best possible institute in the country.
Thank you, sir. So moving forward to our last question of this session, which has been put forward by Mr. Arora, Administrative Staff, Punjab Group of Institutes. He seeks to ask, don't you feel that it is the time to introduce 100% practical-oriented programs to produce handyman who can perform all types of tasks like plumbing, electrician, etc. in societies?
I think that is what is already in a way happening, because if you look at the migration of the labor which happened in this last 3 months, initially they were not allowed. There was a lot of resistance. Some of them walked. Later, trains were started. People went to their respective places. They all had some kind of a skill or the other when they were in the larger cities. When they go to a village, probably that skill set which they had learnt or were practicing may not be useful there. And therefore, how a related skill sets can be developed. In fact, my one of the doctors was saying that heart operation is nothing but plumbing. In plumbing, you have all variety of pipes being connected, joints. You cut them and again reconnect them. You have a elbow, you have a T, and in heart operation also you have different arteries, veins cut, and you pick them up from some other part of the body and then again join them. I think therefore the two skill sets are so different, and one is so high end and one is so low end in our opinion, but both have some commonalities. I'm giving extreme example, may not be the right one, but I just thought of when the plumbing word was used, but probably something else. Plumbers can also make use of for creating some other infrastructure related activity. They may learn electrician's job. So certainly there is a scope for multifaceted, multi-skilled kind of an ITI program where people learn 2 to 3 skills, and if there is a downturn in one of the skills, they can get into the other skill and start continuing to earn livelihood. I think that's very, very good idea. But my point is, even engineers or doctors or lawyers or management experts, in our classes, we must have at least 1 or 2 skill sets that we must learn. Only then, there are 2 things. Sometimes we are so dependent at a house, suddenly if the fuse goes off, an electrical engineer calling an electrician to repair it or fix it is the saddest story I can imagine of. And therefore, some skill sets we must earn ourselves, and we will also in the process understand the labor involved behind that, the kind of talent that is involved in doing that. And like for example, an automobile engineer is asked to fix a non-working engine, he will struggle and sweat, but he will not do it. And then he will understand the importance of a mechanic who just does it in 1 hour. But if he charges 500 rupees, I am willing to pay that, is the philosophy that you will develop. Otherwise, you will crib about paying 500 rupees. I think dignity of labor is also inculcated if you start practicing yourself.
True, sir. Indeed true. Thank you so much, sir. We are truly grateful to you for enlightening all of us with your wisdom and knowledge. Thank you, sir, once again. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to an end to today's session. Indeed, I feel blessed to hear Professor Dr. Anil D. Sahasrabudhe on the topic where every attendee must have got immense information and knowledge. I once again extend my sincere reverence on behalf of Geeta Ratan International Business School, Rohini, to you, sir, for agreeing to spend your precious time with us this lovely evening. Thank you so much, sir, once again.
Thank you, Kavya. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm also very thankful to all the attendees for putting up through your provoking questions in the episode to make the show even more vibrant. Thank you, all of you, for joining us here today. Thank you all once again for your precious time being with us today. Thank you so much, everyone. Good night, everyone. Take care. Please take care of yourself and your families. Stay home and stay safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.